And we're back, and if you're just joining us, we are continuing our conversation with our panel. We are talking about the launch of 16 Days of Activism, specifically about fighting against gender-based violence. We have with us on set Cynthia Williams, who is the Executive Director of the National Women's Commission. In the middle, we have Dr. Sharmayne Saunders, who's the President of Haven House. And on the end, we have Mental Health Counselor Aimee Jex. Good morning. And let's keep it all going. So before the break, we were talking about a number of issues. And we really kind of honed in on one specific area, which is where do the innate circumstances within us come from? Or what are some of the things that we are growing up seeing and being normalized of that allow us to still have this issue of gender-based violence? And I want you all individually to weigh in on what you think it is that we need to start to build a counterculture for to see the change that we want.
I think for me, in terms of the work that, working in this sector for a couple of years now, I think one of the areas that we need to strengthen, we need to work more is in terms of engagement of men. Because we have for so many years, the focus has been a lot on the victims and survivors. And part of the prevention aspect has to come the engagement of men. And I say that because most times, perpetrators are men. And so if we want to be able to change the narrative, we want to be able to change the messages, we have to engage men. Often when I say this, the response is kind of uncomfortable and resistant, because at the end of the day, men are privileged in our society. And so often that privilege kind of allows certain behaviors to be accepted or to be expected, and we need to challenge those behaviors. With privilege comes responsibility, and that is something that we hear all the time. And so we need to be able to engage men to help them really look at those behaviors, the attitudes and norms that society also cultivates in them, and to see how we can move beyond that. That step will take a long time, but we need to be able to start. And there has been attempts in the past where we engage men to look at, not in a confrontational manner, but rather how does that behavior also limit you? How does perpetration of violence and the behaviors that we speak of limit men from actually engaging with in their relationships more fully, engaging within their families and the raising of their children in a more productive and sustainable way for their families. So for me, I think that's one of the areas that we need to really address and would definitely help in the work that needs to be done.
I agree. I remember, I think about 5 years ago, my daughter asked me, "Mommy, if you're doing all this work for women, who will save the boys?" And I said, "Girl, I can't save the boys." I mean, I didn't know how. And that was a 16 Days of Activism. That was the first year she went with me, and she took 16 students with her, and she had 14 boys. And I looked around, and they were the only boys at the event, the launch of the 16 Days of Activism. And all throughout her high school years, those boys, even at the launch of our 5K run on Saturday, those boys are still coming with her. And I realized maybe I was not seeing something, and I think that's also, we are the ones who do the advocacy work. We haven't included the youths. I think that's also lacking, because she was probably 11 when she told me that, and I didn't think about that. I mean, I do the wrongs, I go on the talk show, and I remember a man saying, "Well, miss, you," at one of the local radio stations, he said, "But I am being abused too. Where do I go?" And I couldn't tell him, "Well, go to the men's department." I couldn't, because
there is none.
And he was sincere. It wasn't a joke. It was something that he was experiencing. Now more so, I am seeing also same-sex relationships, and they come to Haven House and they anticipate that we will take them too, but our purview doesn't allow that. So it's a mix of a lot of things, but I think that we have to include young people as part of this whole work, because they too understand, they have solutions. I mean, I listened to the child parliamentary sitting, and I'm amazed.
Yeah.
So
that
here's
these
my
kids
next
have solutions.
here's my next question, and I'm glad that you alluded to the fact that you now have the prevalence of same-sex relationships, right? But it would seem as if though perhaps your rules of engagement, for want of a better expression, are antiquated. That you're not looking at what those new developments are in terms of relationships. It's no longer heterosexual in a strict manner. It's now, same sex and other forms. A male is in a relationship with another male, and there is violence.
Yes.
That person has no respite. There's no way or nowhere that individual can turn to. Now, if you look at it from another point of view, you have two females in a relationship. There's also physical and other forms of abuse.
Absolutely.
Can that individual turn to Haven
and
House?
that's why I am, and that is an area, and you're right. We are antiquated in the way we approach, antiquated in the way our laws, antiquated in the way we advocate for our laws to be changed. And if we don't say it, and when we say it, we're definitely going to be criticized for saying it. But what are we doing about it? Absolutely. We've put it on the table before, particularly because our agency was looking at continuum of care, not just when you get them out and you have them in, what happens on the continuum of care. We cannot provide that service, but we have to link with somebody else who can. And it's been years now we've had same-sex relationship, maybe only in this, you'd think only in the sense of two female, but we've had transgender relationships that have contacted us. We can only provide an alternate solution to them, but it's not inclusive. We're not integrated either.
Right. And that's why the issue of gender-based violence is a developmental issue. It's a development issue. It is not a woman's issue. And we have to approach it that way. And you rightly said, things have evolved, things have changed. In Belize, like many other countries, we have not evolved with that. And we will get a lot of people will not like us saying that because of our own, even in terms of faith perspectives that as a country we hold very close. But we have to understand that when it comes to ensuring that people's rights, that people are protected and people are provided with the options and resources that they need, we need to move beyond that. The government is the duty bearer, and so there needs to be certain strategies that need to be addressed. And so we have the National Gender-Based Violence Transaction that looks at even trying to understand what is the reality within those contexts, because we don't know what is the reality even in terms of elder abuse, where we're finding a lot of cases of elderly abuse, sexual elderly abuse. And so those things are not even brought to the forefront, because then if we barely want to talk about sexual abuse of children and young people, much less of elder abuse, sexual abuse, because then in our minds, in our culture, old people are supposed to have sex. So those are the conversations, and these are the challenges that we need to bring within the sector for us who work within it to be able to be always on the cusp of what needs to happen, but also ensure that we have that conversation with everybody, parents. So we need to include education system, because they have a lot of contact with parents. So it's being able not to recreate the wheel, but being able how to use those spaces that already exist and bring them to the table. The issue of health, a lot of people go to health, but do we even link issues of gender-based violence to health? We don't. I mean, Dr. Sharmayne really brought an important point that we don't know if there's any correlation, but in my mind there is.
And
because
cancer can be stress-induced.
Exactly. So definitely we have to look at all those areas.
So, just, I think that it's important that we close off with something that the viewers will be able to adapt or change or at least reflect on. We know, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about it, we know that as a society we tend to be very judgmental of people who are caught up in cycles of gender-based violence, whether it is physical domestic violence, whether it is a victim of rape or sexual assault. And even when we look at people with psychological and emotional abuse, we just don't understand it. What do we need to do on an individual basis? What do you think will help in us being able to become a society that will be more responsive in a way that we can change the situation?
My first thought is treat people how you want to be treated. That's the premise of my marriage.
Yeah.
I told my husband, you can't embarrass me, because just out of shame, I'll do it back to you, you know. So I think it's basically, and that is within your span of control. How would you want to be treated? If I do something wrong, you don't like to be yelled at, why would you yell at me?
Yeah.
And it calls you to do some restraint. You have to be restrain yourself from doing it, because in the heat of the moment you may want to react. And another thing is saying sorry. I think we don't like to say sorry. It's as hard as, to me, saying sorry is as simple as saying good morning, which we all grew up. But now, you know, the world is changing. We don't say good morning as we used to. But I think saying sorry also helps, because you take some ownership of your behavior. You are not responsible for other people's behavior, but within your span of control, you have that much that you can do, which is, and I just say it's simple: treat people how you want to be treated, and say sorry. It takes nothing. If it took weight off me, I would be very slim right now. Just say sorry, and that would be that first inroad into healing, you know.
Aimee?
Empathy was actually my go-to response as well. When you put yourself in that person's situation, would you be judgmental? When you put yourself in that person's situation, would you speak to that person in that way? And it's the same thing. When you look at it from your own perspective, how can you deal with it differently? And that I feel is what we don't do. We judge, like what you said. We look on as, well, that's not what is happening in my situation. That's their world, not mine. But when you actually see yourself in that situation, what would you do?
I think for me, and it kind of, you know, for us to be able to get that, you need to be able to become involved. You need to become aware. You need to understand. Often, because we don't understand, we judge. Because we don't know, we do not become advocates for people. And an advocate can be anyone. If someone just needs to know what is the process for you to go and make a report at the police station, what is the process to become, you know, access services at different, as a ministry as a whole. So definitely you need to be able to do that. And I know we never got a time, but today is a perfect opportunity. As part of 16 days, we will be having a community fair at the IT vet, starting at 9 in the morning up to like 2 o'clock, where we have a group of agencies, government and non-government, speaking about what is it that they offer, what is it that they can do for people. And definitely that is the first step, because if we don't know what exists, we wouldn't be able to do that. Like I said, today is the launch of 16 Days of Activism, just the official launch, and it's always good to bring people together, because you can sometimes get tired in this line of work. You can get frustrated, and so it's important whenever we have these type of events to kind of pick up our, say, you know, let's go again, like pick up our drive. And so that's why we do the launch on a yearly basis. So it often the criticism, oh, you only appear on morning shows. No, we do work throughout the year, and you know, even in terms of this particular instance, to challenge the media stations, to really and openly say, what is your role? What is it that you can do to also be a part of the discussion and reducing actions that perpetuate violence? And so we hope that we have a calendar. People want a copy of it with activities through all partners. We can send it to them electronically so that they are aware of what is going on in their districts. And they can also have activities on their own. This is not something that is owned by government. Anyone can come together in their community and say, you know, I want to do this activity. How can we help? How can we be a part of it?
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. This is just a slight spark as to what we hope will take place within workplaces, within households, just to get the conversation started. What are we facing with gender-based violence? What is our individual role, and what can we do differently to change it?
And Marlene, very quickly, because I will be remiss if I don't say it, because we have one particular activity that we're doing tomorrow, which is the Men's Barbershop Forum, in partnership with the Spouses of the Caribbean Leaders Action Network, SLAN. And so we bring 70 men coming together to engage them, hear what is it that, in terms of what is fatherhood, what is masculinity, which is an issue that often we don't talk about as well. And so at the end, we hope to be able to get from them, what are some of the things, what are your needs? And maybe choose one or two that we can say, let's try and do something about it.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you too.
We're going
as
to
well.
go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in a few. Please stay tuned.